All right. Greetings, everyone. I, Uttam Kumar, Partner Development Manager at Datagaps, welcome you all to this session on how Agentic AI is transforming data product development. As we all know, Agentic AI introduces intelligent, semi-autonomous agents that automate tasks across the data lifecycle, from ingestion to validation and deployment. By shifting left, these agents detect data and pipeline issues earlier, improving data quality and accelerating delivery. They enhance continuous monitoring through proactive anomaly detection, self-healing mechanism, and adaptive learning. Yet organizations face real challenges integrating agentic systems with legacy processes, managing trust and governance, ensuring data security, and building the cultural readiness to adopt an agentic agile approach. Leading this discussion today, we have Jatin Molri, Vice President of Sales at TestingXperts. He drives go to market strategies in digital assurance, AI enabled testing, and enterprise data analytics, helping clients enhance software quality and extract value from data driven initiatives. Throughout the session, I request all the attendees please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A section in the session window. We will try to cover them at the end of the talk. Also, there will be polls in between to make the session engaging. With that, let's invite Jatin to take the stage. Jatin, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Uttam. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here in Trusted Data Summit 2025. I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation. My name is Jatin Molri. As Uttam briefly introduced me, I head client services with testing experts, and I also oversee data practice and come across with clients and customers on they're trying to solve their regular data problems. Um, to this session, there are a few takeaways that I would, that everybody would expect from this presentation. I'm here to share my point of view on four things. Essentially, how agentic AI is revolutionizing the traditional approach of developing and deploying data products. How can a semi-autonomous approach, agentic approach, can further shift left the quality and testing and speed to market, improve the speed to market in an agile process? And then what are typical challenges that we guys face when we start implementing this in on ground on regular agile? So we have some lessons learned. We have some data that we come up across after implementing agents in our sprints and agiles. Would love to share those lessons with you and want to have your thoughts and feedback as well. So before we go to the agents and deployment, so let's take a step back and talk about how this evolution happened. If you look at pre 2000s, when waterfallish approach was very famous, very prevalent, everybody wanted to go to a planning sessions. The developers used to develop the code, and then it has to it were handed over to testers for testing the product. Eventually the testing life cycle was stretched to about 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and so on, and the speed to market was so longer, and that's the time when agile came up. In SDLC it was implemented way beyond, way before than data, but then in the data world, again in the around 2000 2015 is the time when people started transforming from it, waterfallish to agilish approach, and then eventually there comes semi-agile, full agile models, different kind of agile ceremonies started, implementing. And as the agile process get evolved, data ops came into place. You need pipelines as to get the data being, flow from one source to different flows, and eventually all the way to reporting. In around that time, when as the agile and data ops were picking up a lot, the challenge was, the bottleneck was coming, was testing. Because the developers were hitting up the velocity. The product owner was fair enough to plan his sprints and the milestones based on whatever the release plan they had. But by the time testers come into play in the entire agile life cycle, it was too late for them to test. And what happened was, there all inconsistencies are there, all The ETL jobs are not running correctly. The businesses start complaining about the conflicting frictions. So that's where automation came into play in 2015, 2020, as we all know. Where we started implementing automation tools, and every tooling company started expanding their their coverage across different APIs, different databases, different platforms, connectors. They start, improving the coverage. And now in 2022 to 2024, where we are seeing a drastically shift from automation to agentic. So how the agents are being infused to take over some of the low-lying fruit, work that the testers are being doing as in today, developers are being doing as in today, the data engineers are being doing as in today. And that fusion of the engineers, the testers, and the sprint planners has really come up with an agentic agile model. And that is something where we're going to talk today, how this multi-agentic architectures are helping shift left those some of those areas that we are looking at, some of the issues that we are facing every day in day out. These are some of the common problem statements. So I'm sure you every day in day out you might be hearing this and you might be facing it in your regular projects, whether data is inconsistent. The compliance issues are so heavy, they're not masking the data properly, or even the unmasked data is coming up in different environments. The teams are not satisfied with the quality of the data product which has been developed. The business is every day reducing, sharing conflicting statements about the engineering testing teams and the quality. So that's some of the common problem statements that I'm pretty sure everybody come across. Now the question, what I did is, I took those slide of those few problem statements that we commonly hear, and then I sliced it into a 2 week sprint. Now, this is a plausible example of how the 2 week sprint look like. Um, I'm pretty sure this activities, this frequency may vary from sprint to sprint depending on what the goal is. But essentially, if you look at your, assuming it's a 2 week sprint, and you're starting from your sprint planning to all the way to retros, and then you have your requirement analysis. You start with your data discovery. The engineers start, data ops person come in and start building those pipelines. The data engineer come into play and he start building those transformation logics and business logics. And then eventually the testing team comes where he start doing testing. The challenge here is, if you look at in this cycle, this entire 10-day cycle, your testing has been, is being starting at day number 7 or day number 8. And if you're doing in sprint testing, but if you're in most of the cases, what you're seeing is still it's n-1 testing, where you have developed some data products. There are a lot of sampling approach going on as in today. People are not testing the jobs appropriately, and whatever the data product has been developed in the last sprint, they have been handed over to testing team to test and then eventually do integration and regression testing and UAT, which is kind of an approach which has been taken over. Um, uh, a shift where people have started doing in sprint testing, but when they do in sprint testing, there are a lot of areas where they're not aware of where the unknowns are. So to get rid of all this stuff, they have we have introduced, or there are a lot of automation strategies that have come into play, which I'm going to cover right now in the next slide. The people have started following test driven approach. So as soon as your requirements get freezed, the people started using those requirements to build your SQLs or build your ETL jobs as soon as your schemas are being mapped or as soon as your schemas are being designed. And that all planning from day 1 to day 10, as your sprint is moving ahead, testing is infused in each and every layer. Now, in this slide, if you look at on day number 9 and day number 10, what happened is the testing team get a very little pocket of testing the time. Based on what happened is it eventually leads to a heavy backlogs. The product deployments get delayed. The incomplete testing happened. Your data is not tested appropriately. You are still following a sampling approach, and then again all this confliction starts. Now, how can we improve upon? the question comes: how can we improve upon all these problems that we just listed upon, the inconsistencies, or whether it's mapped it in an agile? And one of the way that people have started doing is an agent. Now the question comes: what is an agent? So agent is just a virtual human, I would call it. I have a name, Jatin Molri. Agent has its name, which you can give it a test author. I'm just taking an example. I have a context. I'm here. I have some roles to play. Same, an agent has a role to play where it can go and read, and behind the agent, it can create some stuff. I have responsibilities. I have tasks to perform. Similarly, agent has a task to perform. And then I have tools. I use Salesforce, Workdays, Teams, MS Office, a lot of tools and enablers. Agent has their own frameworks. You call them a crew. You use them AWS. You use Azure. You use any other enabler or framework that's there in the market to build those agents, to create those agents. And then there's the brain. Then there's an LLM, large language model, which basically is infused, which is trained enough to use different sets of data to perform certain tasks. So if you combine all these five areas mentioned here, five bubbles mentioned here, it becomes one agent to perform a certain set of tasks, a certain set of activities. Now think about it: using an agent to do the work that a tester is doing. A tester is reading your ETL specs, reading your requirements document, reading your schemas, and then eventually deriving some mapping document. Yes, an agent can do as well. An agent can read the same stuff, analyze, understand, and create it for you. An agent can read your stored procedures, whatever the business logic is there, and create your test cases for you. That's something what we guys do manually, right? And that's how this agentic approach is coming into picture, where an agent come into a role where he picks these mundane tasks and generate some outputs, relevant outputs, which can be utilized, whether you're utilizing it in a sprint, whether you're utilizing those in waterfallish approach, whether you're utilizing them in your regular testing regression cycle. Again, that depends on how and where you want to use them. Now, what is the goal of this agent? So once this agent gets implemented, the goal is, A, you want to empower your data agents to take the burden off data testers, which I just explained certain use cases to you. Yes, you want to use data agents to test case for authoring, monitoring, observability, and so on. You want to enable human data testers to focus on high value strategic work, test strategy creation. Of course, agents can support you, assist you, but you can't rely on them. Sprint based test management, which is very, very important. Your sprint planning and sprint management is the most important task. You picking your epic, picking your user stories in such a way that it has all the relevant tasks associated with it, which can be achieved in that particular 10-day sprint. That's very important. So those are the strategic things that your data testers, your data agent should do, while your data testers who are focusing time and energy on writing down those test cases, that can be easily eliminated and replicated by the agents. And that's where how agentic is coming to play. And then similarly, if you're talking about the managers delegating tasks and then communicating effectively, communication is very important, because what happened is, and that become a prerequisite for all agentic and multi-agentic architectures. If your documentation are incomplete, your ticket set doesn't have a right level of information in that, how can an agent understand and learn? So that discipline, consistency, and approach has to be changed. And that's what I'm going to touch upon in this coming slide: how to implement and how to improve upon these practices practically on ground, while we talk about bringing agents to do some of the work which our testers are doing. Now let's talk about a shift left approach. So the slide that I showed you earlier was plausible view of how testing is done in sprint. Now this is an ideal world, an ideal case scenario, I would say, in an ideal world, how this agentic 2 weeks or 10 day sprint should look like. Now, if you ask me a question like, "Hey, Jatin, is this something that practically happens?" It can happen. Do you say like, "Hey, Jatin, it happens every time"? No, it doesn't. You say, "Are this something easy to do?" No, it's not. but it's a practice. You have to follow a practice. You know, the things fall apart in subsequent, in a first sprint, second sprint, third sprint, and then eventually it's a continuous activity. As you start gaining lessons learned, as you start implementing an iterative agiles using your multi-agentic architectures, you start seeing the results. And that's what we are trying to put it here. So if you look at right from here, test planning, there are three colored boxes. The one in the test planning, which of course a human has to do it. There's which an agent can definitely support it, but they can't drive it. The one which you see in the dark blue color, those are the ones which require a minimum intervention from a human, a tester, while a person, the boxes with the light blue colors are the one where you need human intervention to monitor them, review them, approve them, and there's workflow there. So combination of all three make up, becomes your agentic agile. Now, how does it work on day-to-day basis? Is like when you do the planning, as soon as you started creating your pipelines, as soon as you started analyzing your data requirements, you know every platform has their own agent. Even data gaps have their own agents. You can just give a command to the data gaps agent, and then they're going to start reading the mapping document. It start creating those health check tests for you. They start creating schema validation tests for you, and that you can do as soon as your pipelines get developed on day three. Now, depending on how complex your business logic is, how lengthy your logic is, it may take like 2 days for you developing that transformation code. It may take 3 days, depending on what the complexity is. But assuming it's like 2 days work or 3 days work, your testers can start writing tests right as your developers or engineers are writing the code. That's the notion behind it. So you're basically, the agent is reading your specification document and start creating down those tests, right? Creating down your sequels, and then start ingesting those into your execution lifecycle, and you can start executing on whatever platforms you want to execute them, whatever databases, platforms, or the cloud system that you have. And then eventually, when it goes to your, the difference between the last slide and this slide is, the if you look at the last slide, the test execution started on day 8th or day 9th. And the reason is because, of course, you are not ready with the code. When you get the code, the testers start writing down their plannings and test artifacts, and then you need time to do execution where by the time your sprint get over. Or either you spill over the work to next backlogs, or you stretch your sprint, or you are not able to complete testing in a way it should be. And here with agents and multi-agentic approach, what we're trying to say is the same testing you can do on day 4 and day 5. I mean, practically speaking, if you're able to achieve from day 9 to day 6 in your first iteration, that's a big win for you guys. And that becomes the shift left as a first milestone. The second milestone would be from day 6 to day 5. The first cut you can get very quickly. You can easily cut down your 2 or 3 days of cycle. But the second sprint becomes a little hard. Second shift becomes a little hard. So, but our goal with a multi-agentic and agentic approach is to continuously iterate and shift left from your day 10 to your at least to day 4, day 5, so that we can do testing in parallel to what your development is. And the goal is, once you do the shift left, your backlogs get reduced. You're doing not a sampling approach right now. You're doing a full blown automated testing. You're testing your terabytes of data. You're testing your 10 million records or whatever the records are there. You're testing them as you go. You're testing your glue jobs or whatever your ETL transformation jobs you've written, and there's a full complete automated test that's been happening. Instead of tools, agents are doing it. And the other difference is the autonomous approach. So the question comes, hey, some of these tasks can be done by automation tool. Why an agent? The difference is the agent is self-learn, self-adapt, self-heal. And that's probably the biggest win the agent has versus a tool, an automation tool. And that's something as a continuous approach. And your as your consistencies are coming in, as your defects are being logged, the agent gonna go and read those tickets, continues to read those inconsistencies and learn and make its memory more sharp. If this kind of anomaly detection happen, what kind of what kind of source it was, what kind of transformation logic it was, what kind of the location was from where this got triggered. So all those logs are being read continuously, and that's what, and you have a continuous semi-autonomous agentic approach where it can continuously read, learn, and adapt. Read, learn, and adapt, and you can learn. And you can. This has been done in the pipeline, so it's 24/7. A human cannot do 24/7 approach, but of course, an agent can learn and perform, learn and adapt, learn and adapt. That's something how it's going to do in this shift out agenting approach. Now, the question comes a little bit. This view is a little bit more detailed on how these agents will work in a sprint. If you look at these are all these different agents. If you want to implement a true agentic agile, you need set of agents. One agent gonna do validation. It's gonna read the business requirements document, create schema validation test. It will hand over the artifacts to the second agent, who gonna do the pipelines testing, and then third agent who will be doing a business rules validation testing. And then, once your rules are being written, your test cases have been executed. There is some kind of, you can prioritize those tests. So there's an agent which can help you prioritize those tests, and then you can log those defects in different management tools. You can prioritize those logs. You can learn from those logs and then retrain your agents to do the different kind of tasks what you're expected to do, and then it's going to hand over to the anomaly detections, and that depend upon how to analyze those trends and defects. And based on that, so a series of agents. If you look at on this diagram, there are one in the orange color, or I would say amber, and the second is in the blue. And the variation is the blue agents are the one which are associated, which data gaps give you as in today, where we have those agents already written in the platform itself. So you can do all the test authoring, you can do all the test execution, you can schedule it, you can prioritize it, you can do all the observability and anomaly detections, you can even do all the BI validation stuff with the agents, and then even you can do categorization. So all this part is already built into the DataGap's platform, which you can use for an agentic approach. The one which are in the amber, where we are saying triaging, where we are saying fixing, where we are saying remediations, code generation, code, and then taking those code and locating the locator to fix that. All that pieces are being agent that we have testing experts have developed that communicate with the agents that data gaps have to give a true agile format. And that's how this entire in sprint multi-agentic approach works, where one agent communicate with the second agent, perform the set of tasks, but human is always in the loop. So it's not a truly autonomous, and probably it's going to take next 5 years because this is still an evolving approach where everyone is trying to put the heads together, trying to learn their lessons as they're implementing. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm sharing what we have done and what we are lessons learned, what we have on this while implementing. And these are some of the, on the right hand side, if you look at those, are the clear demarcations of which all tasks an agent can pick and which all tasks a human can pick. And that's how this truly in sprint multi-agentic approach comes into play. Now the question comes, we understand what an agent is, we understand what an agentic agile look like, we understand how to use this multi-agentic into your sprint cycle to do shift left. But many times I hear from our customers saying, "Hey, we are not ready to do that." And when I ask them why, there are multifaceted answers to that. Some people say we are not technically equipped. Some say there's a lot of gaps in the process. We need to fix that first. Some people say our people are not that are outdated. They're not that trained enough to adapt these kind of technologies. And then, of course, there are a lot of challenges that comes up. It's a data. It's not a piece of code, and managing, training, using, consuming data is the most toughest thing I believe, because that's a pretty uh, that makes your software robust. The outcome that you're expecting from a product or data product. So to do that, to implement this agentic transformation, there are four main areas that we strongly believe what we have done. Um, Technically, upgradation and modernization. That's number one, which is pretty much required. process changes and process optimization, training, cross-functional training, and then cultural adaptation. So if you combine these four pillars together, it takes time to get to a point where you start seeing value out of those, multi-agentic approaches. But if you have not fixed the basics, then you won't get the value. But if these basics are fixed, the value get multifaceted, and you can the more robust your four pillars are being fixed, the more faster ROI you can see with this kind of multi-agentic structures. And that's how that's what we try to come up with, and that's what testing experts try to help organizations, clients first fix the basics, and then we try to implement the change. And then once you have implemented a change, then we start monitoring the change. Like, okay, what are the benefits or what are the ROI you're getting it? And then what are the lessons learned we are getting from each and every implementation? We start infusing them in the next iterative cycle. So that's how it's an iterative process. It's not a piece of software that you just bring in, you code it, and you develop and you implement it, you get results. No, it's an iterative transformation journey that takes at times 2 quarters. It takes at times 4 quarters. You start getting results and benefits in Q1, but eventually, if you really want to see the true power of agentic transformation, it takes about a year to get to that level. Um, these are some of the technical challenges. Let me touch upon, for example, what makes your agent success? The question comes: I have an agent, but it's not giving me right results. Very common example and very common argument that I hear from our customers, and it's just depending on so many factors. Your is your mapping documents correct? Is your tickets being written appropriately? How detailed your people are writing down those information in the logs. What kind of security guardrails you have implemented, or compliance check you've implemented when you are training the data on an agent. Are there mechanisms to record and manage the drifts that are happening, whether in terms of the change management at the source, or whether it's happening at change management at the target or on the schema drifts? And then what are those different approaches to fix those siloed data which is happening? Many times we see the agent has been developed, but the data infrastructure which is there is not appropriate to handle that kind of a power that the agent required to perform within the fraction of seconds that we are expecting. So there are several factors which I've listed down here, which is, and these all are a portion of some of those factors which we have observed when we implemented this transformation for some of our customers. I'm sure the list can go on, but these are very common challenges that we hear. Now the question comes, how we can fix them. That certainly is an area where, are we training our agents appropriately? Are we identifying the agents protocols appropriately? Are the task alignment being done appropriately? There's so many factors that we typically come across, but the real value when you start doing is converting from your traditional agile to your semi-autonomous agile, and that's the main goal what we are trying to solve here. So that we can increase the product quality, we have faster speed to market, we have shortened release cycles, all the friction between the dev team and the testing team gets shortened, and then of course the agentic precision is always there. So with this, I'll probably take a break here, and I'll take a pause here and see if there are any questions which I can answer for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jatin, for this insightful session. Yeah, there are a couple of questions that we are having in the Q&A section. So to start with, so the first question is, what could be some of the technical challenges organizations face during agentic transformation?
A great question. So as I covered in one of the slide here, so if you look at the very common challenge that we hear is A, tool, B, process, third, skills, fourth, infrastructure. All the four areas has to map together if we are really want to see the true transformation. Now, if you go a deeper dive in terms of process, um, inconsistent mapping documents, which or ETL specifications, have been written appropriately or not. Business logics, how detailed you written it. Now, in terms of the tool, whether we need some kind of specific frameworks. We are using LangChain, or we are using Crew, or we are using AWS Bedrock. So what kind of inclination you have in the past. So tool transformation is the second. That is pretty much required to build these agents. And then third is, of course, on the infrastructure side, how strong your machine, or the server or the cloud is, and how to optimally utilize them. Because what happened is, when you start testing terabytes of data, and you're transforming after transformation or during transformations, your consumption, the cloud consumption, also increases a bit, which probably raise the bar for the CIOs to look at the monthly budgets that come in. So there's definitely a mix and balance that has to come. But from the answer perspective, yes, from technical perspective, all these factors play equal role to make sure your agents are appropriately designed and being implemented in whatever task you're supposed to do.
Okay. Yeah, we have a next question that says, how would you explain the concept of an agent to someone new to data testing or AI?
So I think this is a great question that I was about to I was sharing here. So agent is just a virtual human, I would consider. Um, so an agent can read the series of data trends. After reading those trends, it can consume. So how does a human does? We typically read the document, read the trend, what's happening in the last few years. Even in this call, if you look at, I started with the trend analysis since from 2000, pre-2000, how data industry is evolving. It's a human methodology, a human psychology, how typically we look at. So as we keep observing the trends, similarly, an agent do the same thing. It also observe the trend, where the data is coming, where the data is going, what kind of transformations the data is supposed to do, where is data landing, and what are the inconsistencies we're seeing, in the production or leakage or whatever. And based on that, it's self-learned. And as it self-learned, we also learn, right? We also learn the lessons from when if there's anything that went wrong, is not expected, whatever we're expecting to do that. And same like agent. So you have an agent where you give them a name, you give them a task, you give them a responsibility. You train the agent in such a way from the data, from certain inputs, files, certain whatever task he's supposed to do. You will train him, and then you have a brain. You give them a framework to perform those tasks, so in a iterative fashion, in an agile fashion, or even in any case of regression testing or whatever testing you're going to do. So that's how an agent typically work. And then you can have a series of agents in a multi-agentic architecture. You can have a single agent performing specific task. It
Yep.
depends on how you want to use this agentic approach in your life cycle.
Okay. We'll quickly move to the next question, and that is, what traditional agile pain points do agents solve best?
Super great. So if you look at, there are several use cases. So the biggest, I mean, I won't say the biggest, but one of the value that you start seeing is on the test authoring. So which is a kind of a pretty mundane task. Your testers are reading those specifications and then writing down each and every sequel, each and every task, which can be eliminated from day one. So that's the one of the use case that, of course, Datagaps has a great capability to do that. Monitoring and observability. Earlier, gone the days when you used to write down the scripts. So people used to write down those automation scripts using a lot of tools, and then it used to go and do this with script-based testing. It was doing, but it was not an agentic testing. But the difference between the two is the script cannot self-learn. While agent can. With an agent, it can go. So I would say observability and monitoring are the second use case, which is definitely pretty important. The third, I would say, it can easily solve is your schema test validations. So you can write down your it can go through your specifications and build your tests for your schema validation. Even for the pipelines, when your pipelines you're building in Snowflake or any Databricks or any kind of the platform, cloud platform that you're using, and you're using their agent to build those pipelines, you can use testing agent to test those pipelines. So Snowflake give you Cortex. It does a lot of different functions you can do, right? Similarly, Datagaps has the agent which can go and test those agents in an effective way. So that's how they work. And then there are several. For example, um, you're going to do a test planning. A test author, agent you can train to help or assist a test as product owner to write down those strategy documents. So you can summarize the notes, you can go through the tickets, and then it can give you the actions, what is there. Even we have built some agents that are helping remediation actions. So what it does is you with an agent, it will go through the ticket, it will go through whatever the steps are there in the agent. It will use another agent to generate the code. It will use a third agent to test the code, and then it will take a fourth agent to specifically find the location where this code has to get fixed or it has to there, and then you can do unit testing and compilation testing, whatever you want to do. So all remediation cycle is the other agentic approach that can also happen. So there are several factors, technical challenges that can be solved by this
Okay.
agentic approach.
Okay. The next question is agentic AI only useful for large enterprises, or can mid-size organization can also benefit?
That's a great question, because there's a cost involved as well. For large organizations, no question, no doubt. So you have you know thousands of testers, and you want to definitely bring an agentic approach to make them proficient. Of course, there's a lot of value in that. Mid-sized organizations, big yes. The reason I say is and this is something what I always say in every conference I speak. One is, this is not to replace the humans. I mean, many times there's a notion behind every tester and developer saying agents will come and they will take down their jobs, or there'll be problem with them. No, it's not something they're gonna do that shit. The difference is the elevation of your role. I mean, a human tester, no, I mean, he's supposed to do certain tasks, which agent is trying to assist them. So even if it's a mid-sized organization, and your developers are right, your developers are supposed to write ETL code, but they will have their own milestones as well, right? I mean, they want to speed to market is something every organization want to beat up, and to do that, you need an approach to help meet your goals faster in your life cycle, and that's what an agentic approach is doing. It's not something which is replacing somebody. It is trying to assist testers, whether they're working in a mid-sized organization, whether they're working in a large organization, it does not matter, but it is trying to help them, make them more efficient, make them more proficient, and
Okay.
help organizations to achieve goals faster in the life cycle. And
Okay.
that's the whole notion behind bringing
Yeah.
an agentic and multi-agentic evolution, which is coming today.
Sure. In the interest of time, we'll take just this last question, and others we'll take
Sure.
offline. So, the last question is: do we have any estimate in reduction of work effort using agentic AI?
It's a very subjective question. Tough for me to answer with giving a generic figure.
Mhm.
But what we have seen is anywhere between, you know, in the first iteration, you can easily see around 20 to 25%, with all the way to 50 to 60%. Now, how fast you can achieve your 60% mark in terms of your savings, in terms of your ROI, it depends on how iterative you are, how frequently we are implementing, how frequently we are learning lessons, and the four pillars that you're seeing on your screen right now, how much you're investing in making them accurate. So I think if those are being done, you can definitely easily achieve the savings of about over 60%, I would say. But if again, depending on the certain factors, like how complex your user story is, how complex your milestone is, how complex your schemas are, sources are, what volume of data we're looking at. There are a lot of factors that help us understand and come up to a
Okay.
fixed figure for a particular project.
Okay. With that, we'll wrap up the session. Thank you, Jatin, for these insightful and thought-provoking discussion on how agentic AI is reshaping agile data delivery. And a big thank to all the attendees for your active participation, questions, and poll responses. We hope today's discussion gave you valuable takeaways on integrating agentic AI into your data and analytics strategy. Stay tuned for upcoming sessions and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for giving me time.
For further questions, feel free to reach contact@datagaps.com. Request a free demo, scan the QR code below. Thank you.